Alright, so continuing with old stories on this Nova. This, I guess, would be number 3 of the stories of me and this old Nova. So anyways, let's see. I think on story number 2, we talked a little bit about, you know, the engine, the first 400. And that first 400, I kind of went through 3 transitions of it before the motor that's in it now, you know, ended up in it. But anyway, so talked about the first 2, the first one, then the second one, and then the third one. Well, I guess after a while having the car, driving it around, and this is off of memory. Like I say, I'm doing the best I can remembering how everything was. But anyways, at some point, I know the transmission went out on the car. And so I had took the transmission to, I think it was Cook's Transmission, and bought me a nice TCI torque converter with the nitrous plate. And so that was out of the car. And then I also had run across a 12-bolt rear end for it. So I had been running the 8.5, and I had put a 430 gear in it, and I had put a posi in it. And never really had any trouble out of it at all. Just always heard about the 12-bolt rear ends, and so I found one, got it, and I ended up putting a 456 gear in that 12-bolt rear end that's under the car now. So now I got a 456 gear because, you know, around here, all we really had was eighth mile tracks. And so we got 456 gear, got a new Cook's transmission with a good torque converter. And the engine itself, I ended up pulling it out, and I don't know, you know, at this point, yeah, I had the flow bench, yeah, I had been porting heads, but it's most of this stuff that I ported was factory cast iron stuff back in that era. And really, in my opinion, you couldn't really hurt the stuff. I mean, all you could do is make improvements on how things were at one time with the factory cast iron stuff. And plus, you know, I had kind of moved on from porting. You know, porting cast iron, it's not the funnest thing to do. Maybe some people like doing it, but I just got to where I've had enough of the cast iron heads and stuff like that, porting them. I was doing more with like carburetor work, things like that. So anyways, I had a friend, or have a friend, and he had been working for, like say, a high-end race shop. And all he really ever did that I ever heard about was, for that shop, was port intakes and cylinder heads. And of course, they had all the, you know, dynos, engine dynos. They had track time from the race cars. They had flow benches and all that stuff. And anyway, so when I would look at his work, when I go up to his shop or something, see him and look at some of his work, I could tell that his skill level and ability was, you know, really way beyond mine. And so with the Ellerbrock heads that I bought and the Victor Jr. intake I had, I wanted him to do the portum, do the valve job, the multi-angle valve job, the heights of the valves, you know, all the you know, the trickery they learned to do to make horsepower. And then also I had bought a crane, solid roller cam for it as well. And so anyways, so the car kind of went through a whole transition. I know the exhaust, I had been running those like super traps with 2-inch exhaust, and I went to like a Flowmaster 3-inch, well, it wasn't 3-inch, 2.5-inch Flowmaster system with the crossover pipe. What else I do? Also on the motor itself, when I got it back, I also put one of these crankcase evacuation systems on there. Draws a vacuum on the engine itself when it runs. So anyways, I had him port and polish the heads, do his magical valve jobs and angles that they know that work. I put that solid roller cam in it. Don't remember the specs exactly, but anyways, when I got everything put back together and took it to the track for the first time, yeah, this best I remember, on the old combination, it was always in the 740s somewhere. You know, low 740s, mid 740s, somewhere in there. And I'd done a few little things here and there, stuff like that. But anyways, when I got it back, and if I remember right, you were still kind of at the end of winter. I don't know. You know, it was still a little bit cool out, and one of the tracks had opened up. And so we went there with it, and I don't know what the temperature, you know, it was a cool day out. It was definitely a brisk day and everything. But anyways, went out there, and this thing, you know, I don't remember exactly for sure. I think the mile an hour with the old setup with the car was always low 90s, you know, 90, 91 maybe, somewhere in that area. And so when I went out, the first time out, this thing went like a 718 at almost 98 miles an hour. I mean, if you rounded it off, it was 98 miles an hour. and I'm telling you what, that 400, with that solid roller camshaft, the right spring pressure on there, my friend's porting of the heads, porting of the intake, you know, I'm sure the gear helped out some. I'm sure a fresh transmission and a good torque converter helped out. The evacuation system on the engine, you know, all those things are contributors. But I mean, that was quite a mile an hour pickup. I mean, I was kind of set back. I had no idea that those things, you know, would enhance the car that much. You know, I don't know, gear to me, unless you have a pathetic gear, mile an hour doesn't increase a lot. You know, it can help a little bit, but it's usually quicker times, you know. So anyways, I felt like a lot of the performance, most of it was from his intake porting and his head porting and the valve job that they knew how to do. So anyways, in that configuration, that little 400 in this thing just was, it was a blast to drive with that turbo 350 and that low gear and on the street. I mean, it's like it's like you're in rainwater all the time. You could just stomp it and it just spin through all three gears going down the road, and it's just I don't know what kind of horsepower it was. I'd be saying it's above the 500 mark. How far into 500s, I'm not going to say because I really don't know. But it was a different guy, and the way it liked to rev is just, it was a blast to drive. This thing was just a blast to drive like that. So anyways, over time running it here and there and going to the track with it, I noticed sometimes it'd slow down a little bit, and I'd always find like the carburetor throttle bracket would pull a little bit, and man, sometimes it just wouldn't be much when you look down in there at the throttle, you know, angle, but just a hair off, and you know, it didn't like it. So I thought, you know what, this thing might want some more carburation, because the carburetor I was running at the time was at 650 that I'd done a lot of work on. I had milled the shafts down, knife edged the butterflies, radius, everything, knocked the Venturas out, cleaned them up, you know, just detailed it. So, but anyways, I wanted to try one of those Barry Gant Demon carburetors for it. So I bought a 850 Demon carburetor and put it on there, and she didn't like it. She didn't ever like that 850. That 850, I jetted it around on it a little bit, tried some different things, thinking that it wanted more CFM. But anyways, it just turned out the car just didn't like that big of a carburetor. And so And that's probably why I spent so much money, or not money, but time on that 1000 carburetor I bought for this thing. It was just fear of it being too big for the engine and not making good power. But anyhow, ended up getting rid of the old Barry Gant Demon carburetor and buying me a Holley 750 for it, and then I ended up doing the same type work to it as I've done to 600. And I can't say it like that 750 as much as it like that little 600. The little 600 just seemed like it performed the best on this car. Guy I sold it to, he wouldn't sell it back. But anyways, with the 750 on there, it got more back to where it used to be. So we enjoyed it like that for a while, and at that time, I was getting where some of that pro touring was, I was getting where I kind of liked that a little bit, and you have that little gear in the back, and it was fun. It's fun. And the compression was a little high on that 400, so I always had to run. I always felt like I had to run some type of racing gas in it. I never proved it out. It may have run on 93 fine with the cam and everything that was in it, but I just didn't have a ton of money willing to throw away, and so I always tried to run race type gas in it, or I'd go to the airport and run aviation fuel in it. That was something I did also with it. So anyhow, I was kind of getting done with the car, kind of learned what I wanted to learn with it, enjoyed it, was deciding I wanted to try to do some of that pro touring stuff, and the gentleman had interest in the 400, gave him a ride in it. He was very pleased with it. Ended up selling him the motor and the transmission out of the car, and then I ended up selling the car to a guy I knew who, he builds engines, he does street racing type stuff, and he's the one that ended up buying it and keeping it for a while. And that's where I got the Corvette, built the motor that's in it now, drove the Corvette like that for a while, and ended up not, the Corvette, I ended up putting the original L82 motor back in it, kind of freshened up a little bit nicer. Took that 400 out, and ended up buying this car back from that fella and putting that motor in there, and then driving like that for quite a while. And I liked it because I could, it was a 9-to-1 type motor that's in it now, and I could run, like regular pump gas, kind of drive it everywhere. At 456 gear, cruising down the road, revving it like crazy. But anyways, that's kind of the point to where I had it. And when I got it back with that other motor in it, my son, he drove it to high school some. We'd take it to the track, let him drive it some. And I would actually had some fun with it too, just cruising around a good bit. But I don't know, I bought like it's not like a draggy they have these days. It was like a dyno simulation thing, and you'd hook this recorder up to your ignition, and then you'd hit this button that would start recording, and you'd make a run like you're at the drag strip. And what the thing did is it counted the spark as far as the increase of the engine speed, and then you would download that recorder into the computer, and you put the weight of the car, the gear, tire size, had a lot of things you'd put in there, and then it would give you a horsepower torque curve like off a dyno. And I thought that was a great idea at first, but on slow cars that wouldn't spin, it would give you a better accurate reading. But on cars that had any kind of power that you couldn't start in like second gear or first gear, or you'd have to do like high speed runs in the high gear so you wouldn't get as much tire slip, because that would throw off its thing. So anyways, that velocity speed you get going down through there doing stuff like that, it just ended up, it was just better to do that at the track anyway. So anyways, that's kind of where it was, and decided to move on with other things in my life at that time. We put her up for sale, and I guess it was gone for 20 plus years. I'm not sure exactly. I know it's over 20 years. Maybe 23, 25, I'm not sure. And now it's back. And to me, you know, there's a lot of memories with the car. But it kind of, this is a 90s hot rod. I mean, this is exactly a 90s hot rod. You know, I grew up in, what was the 78, 79, 75, you know, and all those cars were all corked up with all kinds of emission control. So, you know, you get an old car like this, and this is before, I don't know, a lot of power adders. You know, I didn't know anybody who had any kind of a turbo. I don't know anybody who had any kind of really supercharger, unless you know, something sticking out of the hood, you know, that old blower like that. But you're not very often. You just didn't see it around. But the nitrous thing was getting pretty popular. So it started like at the beginning of the power adders, as far as I knew, at least in the realm or where I was and things like that. So anyways, this is kind of like, probably there's a lot of guys who kind of did the same thing, you know. And this is what I consider a 90s time hot rod. So, hope you enjoyed the story, and look forward to the next video. Thanks so much.